All right, all right. That was Grand Cross by Ringmaster. I am Jayme CheeseSlice. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition. This is a fun show with Gloria and Jayme. We were going to be talking about Hawaii today and the fight for Hawaiian sovereignty, and with our guest today, Jon D. Olsen. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, actually, before we get started, let me tell you that this is a radio program first and foremost for those of you if this is your first time ever watching the show, and we are recording this session and you get to watch it live uncut, and then later if you hear it on the radio you're going to hear it edited with to be concise and ready for the radio. But so let's go ahead and get started with the show. This is Gloria and Jayme. How you guys doing today? And let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Jon, welcome to the show. So we're going to do about 55 minutes, and we're going to start now as I hand it over to Gloria. Have a good show, everybody.
Thanks, Jayme. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Uncontrolled Opposition, where together we battle mind wars with truth strikes. I'm Gloria Guillo, an investigative journalist, and I'm here with my co-host, Professor Jeremy Kuzmarov, managing editor of Covert Action magazine. Our producer and engineer is Jayme CheeseSlice. The opinions you hear are ours and that of our guest, not those of WBAI, the Pacifica Foundation, or the Progressive Radio Network. This content is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be interpreted as professional or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to form their own opinions. Today's guest is lifelong activist and philosopher Jon D. Olsen. He's also our personal friend and the show's very good friend. He will be discussing his book with us titled Liberate Hawai'i, Renouncing and Defying the Continuing Fraudulent U.S. Claim to the Sovereignty of Hawaii. In 1893, a group of white sugar barons and their hired guns, backed by U.S. Marines from the USS Boston, marched on the Iolani Palace in Hawaii and forced its queen to yield her throne at gunpoint. No war, no treaty, no vote, just a corporate coup dressed up later as annexation by a sleazy joint resolution that even the U.S. Supreme Court would one day admit had no power to acquire territory. That was the very first American regime change operation, and it was done for pineapple, sugar, and a deep water harbor called Pearl. It was the original playbook. 60 years later, in 1953, there's Iran. Same script, with just a different class in commodities at stake. This time, it's oil and not exotic fruits. British and American oil companies didn't approve of Iran nationalizing its oil, so the CIA bribed generals, paid street mobs, and overthrew a democratically elected government to keep the spigot flowing at less than market value. Next stop, 1954, Guatemala. United Fruit Company got upset that the president was giving unused company land to starving peasants. So the CIA trained mercenaries, dropped bombs, spread propaganda, and installed a dictator. Thousands died so Americans could keep buying cheap bananas. In 1973, well, not really. It's not about the commodities that we get for free. It's about the profits that the corporations get. In 1973, Chile, American copper giants objected to Salvador Allende's nationalization plans. Nixon told the CIA to make the economy scream. They did. Coup, torture, disappearance of tens of thousands, all to protect corporate profits. Fast forward again to 2004, Haiti. President Aristide was pushing for a higher minimum wage, threatening the excess profits of American textile contractors and the big fruit companies that never really left. The U.S. flew in Marines again, kidnapped him in the dead of night, and installed a sweatshop-friendly regime. Hawaii, Iran, Guatemala, Chile, Haiti, same pattern, century after century. The insatiable corporations show up with Marines. then lawyers invent some new legal fiction that renames outright theft annexation, regime change, or humanitarian intervention. The only difference between 1893 and today is that back then they were honest enough to admit they were doing it for sugar, pineapples, bananas, oil, and now they claim it's for democracy. And when that becomes too unbelievable, it becomes terrorism. And when that is unsubstantiated, it becomes drug trafficking. And the latest is the ruse of US election interference. Within this context, Hawaii wasn't the last victim, it was the first. And until the United States finally admits that the takeover was illegal, that the kingdom still exists under international law, every apology for every later coup rings hollow because the very first one has never been undone. Fast forward to today, no war on Venezuela, no regime change. There are no lies that justify transnational oligarchs stealing Venezuela's oil reserves with the military we fund with our tax dollars. No blood for the transnational oligarchs' oil. Please check out my latest article titled Every Voting Tech Hack That Washington Claimed Venezuela Did Was Invented in Ohio more than 20 years ago. It's on our Substack and was republished by Popular Resistance and Tortilla Cansal. So far, it's one of the most shadow banned articles I've ever written. Thank you. Jon, please tell our audience what inspired you to focus on Hawaii and then walk us through your book. Thank you.
Okay, well, I grew up here in Maine, and I felt, and this was in the mid-'60s, after graduating from Bates College, I kind of felt a need. It was like almost like a magnet that said, you need to go to Hawaii, get out of the kind of all-white Maine population, have some adventure. So I applied for graduate work in Hawaii and got accepted. And fortunately, they gave me an assistantship, which helped me maintain myself. That was my introduction. But I just felt I needed to go. And so I did, and I stayed for 36 years, except for occasionally coming back in the summer. I missed 36 years of Maine winters. Yay. So my question for the audience is, this is a trick question for the people listening. How did Hawaii legally become a state of the United States? Conquest, revolution, treaty, annexation, plebiscite, all of the above, or none of the above? The correct answer, as you have indicated here, is none of the above. But the standard history says in 1893, there was a revolution that overthrew the Queen, leading to the provisional government of Hawaii, which then converted itself to Republic of Hawaii. And it was the Republic of Hawaii that was annexed in 1898, followed by the Enabling Act, creating the Territory of Hawaii. And finally, in 1959, a plebiscite that established statehood. Well, it's riddled with inaccuracies. The reality is like this. I use an analogy of the Brooklyn Bridge, which everybody knows. Suppose it was 1935 and I'm a wealthy businessman and somebody comes to me, let's call him Henry. Henry comes to me and says, this is the Depression. I don't have much resources. I need money to feed my family, but I have this deed to the Brooklyn Bridge and I'm willing to sell it to you for $10,000, which of course at that time would have been a lot of money. And I say, let me think about that. What could I do with the Brooklyn Bridge? Yeah, all right, I'll tell you what, I'll get a deed drawn up and we'll transfer it and I'll pay you the $10,000. So I do. And then having the connections that I do, I immediately set up toll booths on each side of the bridge. And being 1935, I could charge 50 cents across the bridge. And then when people ask, how did you get the ability to legally charge for the Brooklyn Bridge? Here's the deed. Right here. End of story. Well, the document that, and of course, over the years, the fee kept going up and up until up to the present at $15 to cross the bridge. And so I've made, $500 million off the bridge that I bought for $10,000. Pretty good investment. Well, the validity of that document is the same as the document that allegedly transferred the sovereignty of Hawaii for the same reason. So let's go back and look at the real history. In 1843, France, England, and the United States all signed treaties recognizing the independence of Hawaii as a sovereign country. That is what established the reality that continues. Within the next few decades, dozens of countries around the world recognized Hawaii as an independent country. Hawaii had consulates, they had embassies, and they were treated as any other country in that capacity. That did not go away any more than when the Japanese were defeated in World War II. The government was disintegrated, that had been the imperial power, but Japan as a country didn't disappear. The same thing with Hawaii. Hawaii as a country has not disappeared, even though the government had been overthrown. So I want to now go to how the state of Mainers were involved, which was quite significant and something that I learned along the way here. The Kennebec Journal, which exists till today, out of Augusta, Maine, the capital, was founded about 1850 by Luther Severance, who was shortly thereafter appointed commissioner, later called minister, and we would now call ambassador, to Hawaii by President Zachary Taylor, shortly after the annexation of Texas. James Blaine, who was a famous political figure from Maine, who was governor and, as we will see, also in Congress, he took over the Kennebec Journal and partnered with the young Jon Stevens. They were co-editors, publishers of the Kennebec Journal. Both of them adopted the enthusiasm of Severance for the eventual gaining of control of Hawaii, as did their ambitious contemporary colleague, Theodore Roosevelt. Blaine was an outstanding orator and quickly became Speaker of the House in Congress, leaving Stevens to run the Kennebec Journal as editor and publisher. Blaine went on to become Secretary of State under Benjamin Harrison, and it was he who later appointed Stevens as minister or ambassador to Hawaii in 1889. Jon Stevens was born in 1820, the same year as the missionaries first went to Hawaii, 1 year after the death of Kamehameha the Great, the first king of Hawaii. Both Blaine and Stevens were founding members of the Republican Party in 1856. As editor of the Kennebec Journal, Stevens was no doubt influenced by his mentor, Severance, with regard to his experience in Hawaii. James Blaine was head of the State Department and later assigned Stevens as minister in the same role that Severance has had. In 1887, the king was forced, at the threat of his death, to sign what is now called the Bayonet Constitution, which basically stripped him of power and conveyed it to the oligarch family of the sugar planters and so forth. James Dole was the head of the Dole Corporation of pineapple fame, and it was his cousin, Sanford Dole, who later became the president of the so-called Republic of Hawaii. Another person who was important was Lawrence Thurston, but he came from Massachusetts and was integral to the coup of 1893. Now, the way they got Hawaii, well, they pretended that a joint resolution of Congress was the same as a treaty, because they tried to put the treaty through. When President Cleveland came into power, exactly at the same time as the coup against the Queen, the people who were in support of the coup sent a delegation to him to ask for annexation. The Queen's delegation also arrived, so he was getting two separate messages. And he said, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to do anything until I find out what really happened here. So he sent his personal representative, James Blount, B-L-O-U-N-T, former congressman from Georgia, to do an investigation. He spent many months there and conferred with everybody involved on both sides, came back and gave President Cleveland his report, which was honest. On December 18th of 1893, President Cleveland addressed the Congress with an 18-page document. But before I get to that, at the time of the coup, which was January 17th of 1893, Liliuokalani was faced with a dilemma. Certainly, she didn't want to surrender her country to the United States, nor did she want to create a war which her people would be slaughtered due to the overwhelming force, including one of the first machine guns ever invented, and cannons facing the palace. So her statement was here: I, Liliuokalani, by the grace of God and under the Constitution of the Hawaiian Kingdom, Queen, do hereby solemnly protest against any and all acts done against myself and the constitutional government of the Hawaiian Kingdom by certain persons claiming to have established a provisional government of and for this kingdom. That I yield to the superior force of the United States of America, whose minister plenipotentiary, His Excellency John L. Stevens, has caused the United States troops to be landed at Honolulu, and declare that he would support the said provisional government. Now, to avoid any collision of armed forces and perhaps loss of life, I do, under this protest and impelled by such forces, yield my authority until such time as the government of the United States shall, upon the facts being presented to it, undo the action of its representative and reinstate me in the authority which I claim as the constitutional sovereign of the Hawaiian Islands. So that was an extremely important statement, preserving the right to the government. But in Cleveland's address, that comes up later on, after he had gotten the report from Blount.
And John, maybe we can. It's a very interesting history. I mean, can you relate it to the present day and the movement to try and reclaim Hawaiian sovereignty and how they invoke this history?
I'll get there.
And John, could you adjust your camera so that your chin is a little bit higher? Yeah, you kind of drop in there. There you go. Okay, beautiful. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So,
and also, is there a book you can recommend? You have your book. What can viewers who want to read more about this history?
Okay, look, can I deal with these after I get through the basic?
Okay, well, try and do it quickly, because yeah.
All right. Well, it's important that what he was saying here. Well, he went through what had actually happened, so I'll skip some of it. And
John, you're slipping down again.
Well, all right. And Cleveland, as part of his address, there was no, when the armed men landed, the city of Honolulu was in its customary orderly and peaceful condition, with no symptom of riot or disturbance of any quarter. And so it was a peaceful occasion. And then he says, by an act of war committed with the participation of a diplomatic representative of the United States and without authority of Congress, the government of a feeble but friendly and a confiding people has been overthrown. A substantial wrong has thus been done, which with regard to our national character, as well as the rights of the injured people, requires we should endeavor to repair. And so anyway, it was an 18-page address, and of course, I'm not going to read the 18 pages. But there was two flaws in the so-called attempt to annex. One was that the treaty as submitted eventually, backing up a little bit, during the 4 years of Cleveland's presidency from 93 through 97, nothing changed. Apparently he didn't have the congressional authorization to force the coup plotters to desist and put the Queen back in power, but neither did he want to recognize the coup as legitimate. So he basically sat on it, and so for 4 years there was a stalemate with the coup people still in power. Well, then when McKinley came in, of course, that was 1898, and there was the Spanish-American War, after which Spain ceded in some sort of a maneuver, probably negotiated behind the closed doors. They ceded Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, and Cuba to the United States, much to the dismay of the people of Cuba and the Philippines. But Hawaii had never been anybody's colony. As we figured here, it had been established as an independent country. So when they tried to put it through under McKinley to annex, it didn't pass. There was this monster petition that they got tens of thousands of people in Hawaii to sign a petition against annexation, a mass mobilization, and that was presented in Congress, and that together with some Congress people who were anti-imperialists and there were other factors, they didn't get the 2/3 majority to have a treaty. So there was no treaty of annexation, contrary to history books. What there was a joint resolution of Congress to bypass the treaty and claim it was the same thing. Now, here's an important factor. If that was legitimate, if that was the same thing as the treaty, then today, any country, let's say China, for example, could, through its own legislative body, pass a resolution saying, we have henceforth annexed the United States, Mandarin will be the language of the country, and we will have Chinese laws that must be obeyed. So you can see the validity, the invalidity of the claim of having annexed Hawaii. So I guess, and so Liliuokalani was under house arrest during much of that time, but she did eventually get to go visit President Cleveland and was very warmly received, treated with the utmost respect, and Cleveland acted honorably during his term with regard to Hawaii, unlike Mr. McKinley. So perhaps
Cleveland, I believe, was part of the Anti-Imperialist League. The Anti-Imperial, we've had a show on the Anti-Imperialist League and how it needs to be revitalized today. And this was a group of Americans, some very prominent, who said the United States was founded as a republic, not an empire, and they were against the kind of scheming you're describing. And actually, Grover Cleveland was part of that. So,
and Mark Twain was a very famous one as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's the essence here. And you asked about contemporary. Well, what has happened over the past 30 years or so, particularly through the efforts of David Keano Sai, who's a Hawaiian, who did deep research into this history and actually did his PhD thesis on this very subject, and has been to the International Court of Arbitration with a kind of a peripheral case, and basically it was well agreed that Hawaii had been, in the 1800s, a country, and they had never surrendered that status. And so he has been, and others have been giving talks regularly all through Hawaii and around the country, around the world, different places. He's often been to other locations, and he had recruited Professor Lenzerini of Italy, who's a professor of law, to join in this cause. And they're taking this internationally, because when they go to the to any U.S. court, it gets thrown out. So this is an established matter. It's already settled. So don't bring us this silly stuff. But internationally, there are people who are paying attention to this issue, and that's where the battle is going. But as far as the population, one more thing. The population, tens of thousands of people in Hawaii understand what I've been talking about today. This is not something that's confined to a few academics. And it manifests in a number of ways, including the recent protest against the huge telescope that was to be put on top of Mauna Kea, which would have had environmental disasters as well as, being intrusion into what they regard as the most sacred spot in all of Polynesia. So, questions?
Sure. Well, yeah, and this is a very important history, and I teach American history, and actually we cover a bit of this history, and discuss how Hawaii, the acquisition of Hawaii or takeover by coup and fiat, was central for the projection of American power into the Asia Pacific and the establishment of the Pacific Empire, which resulted in the colonization of the Philippines and a genocide. I mean, really, a genocide was carried out against the Filipino population to enable U.S. colonization. And then really it resulted ultimately in the Pacific War because Japan tried to counter Western empire by establishing its own regional empire. Now, admittedly, the Japanese went too far and behaved very oppressively and badly in certain countries like Korea and China. But at the root of it was a struggle over empire, and the U.S. provoked the Pacific War. We've discussed that on this show and how Pearl Harbor was provoked and allowed to happen by the FDR administration as a pretext to expand further the U.S. empire, to the position we have today, where the U.S. has dozens of military bases throughout the Asia Pacific. And now fears China the threat to its hegemony. So that leads into my question. I mean, can you discuss the militarization? I mean, the Hawaiian independence movement is predicated, as you point out, based on the illegal takeover of Hawaii by the United States. And there's also this facet of how Hawaii has been used as a staging ground for U.S. imperial intervention in Asia, and that's a reason Hawaiians want to reclaim their country. So speak more about that.
Sure.
Maybe also at the end about the current military buildup targeting China. From what I understand, the U.S. military is expanding its operations in Hawaii extensively in the last several years.
Well, there's a number of things I can address. One is I was there in the 60s and early 70s, and so Hawaii was the staging area for the war against Vietnam. And so there were military planes taking off, one after another regularly in their destruction. And one of the things that they had done during World War II was to claim the island of Kaho'olawe, which is off the coast of Maui, as a bombing target because it was very lightly populated. And so they basically told the current owner, we're taking this over, and they had bombed it for years and years and years, including this bomb called the mother of all bombs that they ended up using in Afghanistan. They tested it there, and it broke the water table because the underneath all the islands are the lava tubes, which are apparently where the water can collect, sort of like ceramic. Similarly, but as a tube, and so that's and so it's basically pretty desolate now, and with a lot of exploded ordnance still there. The movement in the 70s forced them eventually to return the island to Hawaii, but in this kind of devastated condition after a lot of this is really the beginning of the Hawaiian sovereignty effort, when they saw the island being bombed and the red earth, after some rain, it would drift into the ocean. It was bleeding. So this was very meaningful to the Hawaiians, and they sent delegations to land on the island, and then their colleagues back on the mainland other islands would say, look, we got people over there, don't bomb now, you'll kill them. So it became a cat and mouse game that they have to stop their bombing and go send a troop over and capture them, arrest them, take them off, and then resume their bombing. So this went on for several years in the mid-70s, led by a charismatic young guy named George Helm, who was a magnificent musician. And fortunately, we have two of his albums that were done with live performances. But he was a very charismatic young Hawaiian who dedicated his life to this and actually died there in conditions that are very mysterious. He and another man, Kimo Mitchell. Well, there's something like 118 military installations, and they're not necessarily bases. It might be an office somewhere, but something like 118 in the Hawaiian Islands, one of the most militarized places in the whole world. One of which area is Pohakaloa on the Big Island, and this is now currently a major area of contention because the military's lease, they got control of this place for $1 for 60 years, or maybe it was 65 years. And so now it runs out in 2029, and they want to renew it. And so there's resistance, of course, to that, not only for the ridiculous $1, but that they have it at all, because part of the agreement was that they'll clean it up and keep it from being. It's a conservation area. That's what it is. But this is where they do a great deal of military testing, including depleted uranium, which as a piece of metal you could pick up and there's no harm. But the danger is if it gets aerosoled when it impacts. If it's inhaled, it's probably the most deadly substance on Earth. And so that's exactly what's been happening. So people are worried that by using these, how much of this is getting into the air? Is it affecting the residents? Is it affecting the tourists? And so this is finally coming up to be a major area of contention.
Thanks. Yeah. And yeah, can you say something about with the targeting of China? Have you observed? You mentioned 118 military facilities. From what I've read, the last few years, there's been even greater expansion of military activity. Are you able to observe that?
No, I've been in Maine. I'm not really up to speed on what the most recent,
Okay.
Other than this effort to renew the leases, which is now very contentious and is being fought. The governor, of course, wants to play footsie with the military and negotiate using flowery language, and we'll do this and we'll do that. A year or two, maybe 2-3 years ago, there was a huge spill of jet fuel on Oahu, which leaked down into, ironically, military housing. And people were smelling this coming out of their faucet. They were getting sick from it. Their pets were getting sick. It was these gigantic tanks, something like million-gallon tanks that were under Red Hill, which is an area maybe 4 miles from downtown Honolulu, and they were feeding apparently the ships and planes that would be around the Pearl Harbor Hickam Air Force Base complex. And as usual, they were not paying attention to the environmental issues, and they were leaking. And they finally, after enormous protests, they finally have been drained. They're all empty now, and they put the fuel somewhere else. And I don't know if the tanks are going to be removed as well, but there was this huge underground complex with apparently a railroad as well that was going to it from there to the Pearl Harbor.
And does the Hawaiian independence movement, they want to restore, are there heirs to the Queen Lilokalani who are still alive that they would restore?
That's a good question. No, there are no living heirs. So what would happen would be those who are qualified to vote, and this would be the people who are descendants of the original indigenous Hawaiian people. In 1875, they also had a situation where there was no heir to the existing king, so they had an election, and it was David Kalakaua, the brother of Liliuokalani, who won that election in 1875, and he was king until 1891, at which time, on a trip to San Francisco, he suddenly died, and it's suspected that he may have been poisoned. Remember, this was 4 years after the Bayonet Constitution, in which he had been threatened with his life if he didn't sign and surrender many of the powers that he held as king. So the Queen he had designated Liliuokalani to be his heir in such an event. So she took power under those sad circumstances and got to rule for about a year and a half until the coup in fact, 3 days before the actual coup, she was planning to promulgate a new constitution that would overrule the Bayonet Constitution and restore the monarchy to its full normal power. But there were traitors in her cabinet, the Caucasian ones, because some of them were educated, they had positions and had some power. They persuaded her, well, time isn't right. You got to delay this for a while. So unwisely, she said, all right, I'll hold off for a while, even though the people were clamoring, we want the new constitution, we want it now. She held off, and then 3 days later was the coup.
And well, Gloria, I'll see it to you, but I have one other question, related to demographics, because what are the percentage who are native Polynesian? I mean, I know there are a lot of Japanese who live there, a lot of Southeast Asians. So where are they? Are they supportive at all of the independence movement? And what's the demographic breakdown? And also, can you say something about the Polynesians and their class status? And they often do the worst jobs, lowest pay. Is that right?
Well, yeah, Hawaiians tend to be toward the end. There's Hawaiians, and anybody who was part Hawaiian is considered Hawaiian. So they're about 20% of the population. Japanese, probably somewhat more. Caucasian, somewhat more, 20, maybe 30 at the most. Chinese, less, perhaps 8 or 10%. Korean, Samoan, Tongan, Micronesian, all at a lower level. And so I would say there would be a general awareness that what happened in 1893 was not fair. The Hawaiians got screwed over. There's so different levels. Some people would just know that much. Others would have more in-depth knowledge. But like I said, tens of thousands of people know that the details or some of the details that, particularly the native Hawaiian, they've really gotten into this. And on the exact 100th anniversary of the overthrow, to the day of January 17th of 1993, there was a huge mass rally at the Iolani Palace, around 12,000 people, and I was there with my children to witness it and be part of it in support. And some of the truck drivers would lean on their air horns, the big rig trucks, in support as they were driving by, and it really scared the ruling class to have this amount of power. It was a march that ended up at the palace. And so what happened after that, Dan Inouye pushed through Congress and got signed by President Cleveland, and it was unanimous, an apology bill that essentially, and that's in my book here, in one of the appendices.
President Clinton, you mean?
President
1993, yeah.
Yeah, in 1993. Yeah, and so he signed that, but basically apologizing for the overthrow of the queen, rather, at that time, but not doing anything that would rectify the situation. Of course, they're not going to give back Hawaii, but it was like a feeble step in the right direction. But I think it was that big mobilization on that anniversary that scared them into at least doing that, and also maybe making a few other concessions here and there.
And one other thing, when did the Polynesians, because I mean, obviously they came from Asia. When are they thought to have migrated to Hawaii? And what was the economy rooted in before these planters came, like the Doles and others?
Okay, so they were a civilization that had come from the Marquesas, Tahiti, and they had this marvelous method of navigation, and that's a story in itself, with the double-hulled canoes and sails, and they used the stars and the moon and the bird migration, and particularly the currents of the ocean to guide them. 1,000 years before Columbus, they were going all over the Pacific Ocean. And this has been documented. There's a very famous boat that was created in 1976 called Hokulea, which is named for the North Star, which would give them direction because it stays there in the north direction all the time. So these navigators could travel all over the Pacific without any instruments whatsoever. It was all in their head. And there were very few master navigators, but one of them was discovered on one of these remote islands in the Pacific named Mau Piolog. And he taught Nainoa Thompson, who is a Hawaiian, who has been studying how did our ancestors get here. So they made a connection, and so they made an initial travel. They did a replica of one of these ships, which is maybe 40 feet long or so, 50 maybe, double hull canoe with a flat surface, and then the sails. And so I took them from Hawaii all the way to Tahiti in this inaugural reenactment of these ancient, massive 1,000-mile, multi-thousand miles directions. And since then, Nainoa and others have taught several others. So there are now a group of master navigators. So this tradition has not disappeared, and it's celebrated all through the Polynesian islands.
And what was the economy rooted in for all those years? Fishing, agriculture?
Yeah, they were fishing. Obviously the abundance of fish around the islands, and then there was growing taro and sweet potato and perhaps bananas and coconut. Well, they were very healthy people before the contact. They were very strong, robust people, and there were possibly as many as 1 million throughout the Hawaiian Islands. And then the British came with Captain Cook, and things went downhill from there. Part of it was the venereal diseases that some of the sailors had. And as you may know, Captain Cook himself was initially welcomed as the god Lono, having been arriving at the time when the celebration of his abundance. He was the god of the agriculture. So he was regarded as, here he is, he's finally come. But then when they left, and of course they were plied with all kinds of abundance of food supplies, and everybody had a great time. But then they left on another trip, and then there was bad weather, and they came back, and it was like, here you are, we gave you all this stuff, and here you're coming back again. So there was some conflict, and a Hawaiian was killed, and then they killed Cook. So there's that history.
I just want to talk about, I mean, I had been to Hawaii as, more of a tourist for about a month. I went all over a few of the islands, and I was in Kauai for, a couple of weeks, and I was so impressed by the quality of the soil.
Yeah.
Because these islands are really have a lot of volcanic activity. The soil is like black. and it is extraordinarily fertile. And literally anything grows there. It's just amazing, the assortment of fruit. It's such a bountiful and beautiful group of islands.
It is.
And it really is such a tragedy and travesty for these to be just taken over and destroyed. And, I know we've had one of your friends on from Hawaii that talked about what was going on with, I forgot, in Maui.
Lahaina.
And have you any more information on that?
The Lahaina fire you're talking about, probably, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's about 20 anomalies about that fire, similarly to what we've seen around 9/11 and the October 7th is in Israel attack. There's many anomalies.
And I think our friend Chuck has been saying that the attacks on the boats, in the Venezuelan boats, seem to be that same thing where they're hit with something,
Yeah,
and they kind of explode from the inside out. They burn from the inside out, not from anything else.
well, yeah. If there were boats
Go ahead.
in the harbor of Lahaina, and so they were all destroyed by fire. How is it that if they're several hundred feet out in the water and they're saying, oh, it was the embers? Well, embers don't set a whole boat on fire. That doesn't make sense. And so I think it was the same kind of directed energy weapon is what I suspect and I think so does the guy who's investigating this the most, Paul Gloria, who's an engineer, by the way, and also a 9/11 truth person. Very smart guy.
Do you want to direct people to his spot too while we're here?
Yeah, maybe you can there. I can't right now, but he has he is actively combating this and isolating. For example, when the fire came out of nowhere, there was tremendous wind around Lahaina, but there wasn't in other parts of the island or on other islands. They claim, oh, what about the hurricane? Well, the hurricane was 600 miles south of even the Big Island, which was another 100 miles away from Maui. So that the hurricane had no effect whatsoever. It was just an excuse. But the unusual cloud pattern and some very discolored clouding that doesn't add up. And apparently Maui is one of the places where there is a directed energy weapon installation. I haven't had confirmation, but I've heard that there is such. But one of the things was certain buildings were not consumed by fire. And there was right angle turns, where the fire was going this way, and then all of a sudden it met a jag to that way. Cars that were incinerated, and meanwhile the trees around them are still green. There are a lot of things that don't add up. The engine blocks and the wheels of cars melted. Well, they don't get that from a grass fire.
The other thing that kind of blew my mind was how people were burned from the inside out. So their internal organs were gone, but they still had hair and skin. And then he also showed photos of animals in that same condition where the outside is intact, but the inside, it's kind of like what a microwave does. I don't know if everyone has a microwave at home. You turn it on and it actually heats up stuff from the center. So this is, when they're talking about directed energy weapons, that's definitely a telltale sign. And he also, Paul had also put on some photos of trees that still had their bark and leaves, but were completely burnt out on the inside. Exactly. And then he showed some visuals where you had a truck next to a tree, and the truck was burned from the inside out, and the tree was untouched. So it was the selectivity was and this pattern was very odd. And, I remember Dr. Judy Woods and her work on the World Trade Center, and she had the same thing where all the glass was gone on all the cars that were nearby, but everything else was okay. And then the engines were burnt from the inside out. So, it leads one to believe that there is such a thing as directed energy weapons, and that they are in use, and that they're being used against citizens and civilians and public works and private homes and things like that. So, it's just, keep this stuff in mind, and just, people should be open-minded and asking questions, because we don't really have the information. These are questions.
And Jon, can you address, I think the CIA has been very active in Hawaii, not just the military. I don't know if you know much about any CIA operation that may relate to some of these what may be covert operations.
I don't know directly. I haven't lived there for about 25 years, but I try to keep up as much as I can. I do know that in the 60s, on campus, we would be protesting CIA and the military presence, the ROTC, the Reserve Officer Training Corps. That building got burned down one night. And there were recruiters on campus, and we would chase them off periodically and disrupt their capacity to recruit. And I remember Rehnquist came one time as a speaker before he was on the Supreme Court, and he was trying to give a speech, basically defending the Nixon administration, and we heckled him. And I remember saying directly, the reason you're being treated disrespectfully is because you represent a despicable federal government. And that's partly because they were hounding the Panthers. They were killing Black Panther people and other atrocities. Of course, the Vietnam War was front and center. But I could tell you stories about our resistance. Oh, well, I'll tell you a little bit then about how we helped the anti-war activists in the military, because there were often they'd be coming back. They'd give them some time off, rest and recreation, they called it. They'd bring them back from Vietnam for a couple of weeks, and they stood out because, of course, the military had short haircuts, really, really short. And at that time, the 70s, everybody was wearing a hairline, so they'd stand out. You'd go down to Waikiki, and there'd be 2 or 3 together. So we would hand out leaflets to them, and we had a sanctuary, the biggest sanctuary in the military ever. And it was started with one guy that said, "I'm not going to go back. I quit. I announced my retirement right now." So we brought him to the Crossroads Church, and within a day or two, we had 2 or 3 more, and it grew over a month to 3 dozen active duty guys of all 4 branches that said, "We're quitting." And so we had an encampment there at the church, and which then leaked out a little bit to the Unitarian Church and the Quakers meeting house. And so we had the civilian supporters, and we donate food and interact with them. And then and afterward, we would provide literature about Vietnam and about the imperial power that was the aggressor and so forth. And this would find its way. They also, with our help, they also produced a paper called Liberated Barracks, which is one of the several underground papers produced in the military. The most important was The Bond by Andy Stapp, who founded the American Servicemen's Union. Well, his right-hand man, John Catalanoto, came to that occupation because Andy's wife was about to give birth, so he sent John instead. And he spent a week there helping to organize. And one of the people who came, and I'm going to show you a couple of books that are relevant to this. One of the people who was in that sanctuary as a GI was Greg Laxer. And I'm going to show you that book if you can take a look at this. Can you see that?
Yeah. Take this war and shove it.
That's a good title.
Yeah. Gregory Lancer.
Yeah, and I've been in touch with him. And the other book was by Catalanoto, which was this one.
Turn the Guns Around.
Can you read the subtitle?
No.
Okay. Mutinies, Soldier Revolts, and Revolutions. So they were both there at the sanctuary, and I'm in touch. If you'd like to have one or both of them as guests, we could probably arrange that.
Yeah, that would be terrific.
Sounds great.
And Catalanoto went on to write some books, I know, on the Bosnian conflict that were very good, very critical.
Who
was
did?
doing research on the Clinton years. Catalanoto continued doing research on the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, he lives in New York. In fact, when this book came out, I happened to be in New York visiting my daughter, so I was there at the world premiere of this book. And
I would love to have copies of those books. Those are classics.
And was able to give some background on the sanctuary, which both of these talk about the sanctuary in the book. In both of those books, they talk about it. And Greg went in as an anti-imperialist already. I mean, he was already politically very involved, and as Andy Staff as well. They went in with the point of organizing, and I think we need some more of that these days.
Absolutely.
So he formed the American Servicemen's Union and produced a paper called The Bond, which got distributed in the thousands. And these were getting off into the ships and the planes on their way to Vietnam. And so this began to be the how some of the I'm saying wrap it up. This is, and we know that the reason the war came to end was both the Vietnamese resistance, which was refused to be defeated, but also the disintegration of the so-called morale on the part of the U.S. service people who were refusing to carry out the orders and were sabotaging equipment and so forth.
Well, Jon, that we really need to wrap up our show.
Yeah.
So please tell our audience how they can purchase your book.
Okay.
And follow your work.
Well, I'll tell you about mine, and these I could tell you more. I mean, well, mine is this one, and best way that helps me the most is by writing to me at my name, Jon Olsen, P.O. Box 362, Jefferson, Maine, 04348. In that, for $20, I send the book out, autographed. But I'm going to be out of Maine for a while in January. Oh, there it is. Thank you very much. Wonderfully. But for $20, including shipping, I'll send it. The shipping is mostly covered by the $20, a little bit more, but I'll cover that. So even 20 gets you the book. And the picture of it, by the way, is fresh lava from about a year or two that's hardened and then cracked, and there's life coming up through it. So it's representative Hawaiian resistance to the empire.
Let me just restate your book for our listening audience. It is a book by Jon D. Olsen, Olsen, and it's called Liberate Hawai'i, Renouncing and Defying the Continuing Fraudulent U.S. Claim to the Sovereignty of Hawaii. And this wraps up our show for today. This is Uncontrolled Opposition. I'm Gloria Guillo, joined here by Professor Jayme Kuzmarov. Remember to like and share our broadcast. Your kind support keeps us going. Please find us on Substack, Twitter X, and Podbeam. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you next week. Thanks. Okay, we are still on the air. Jon, we're still on the air. We're still live. So if you have any final thoughts, you can just finish your sentences, but we all have to, I think, disappear pretty quick today for various reasons. So just if there's a thought that you didn't get a chance to say, this is a good opportunity.
I'd like to share his article on Covert Action Magazine real quick.
Right.
Because I didn't get to bring that up in the show.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that too.
Yeah,
It says for a listening audience, well, they're not going to get this unless we add it to the mix. Hawaii, the very first U.S. regime change.
Yeah, I think this is a good read for people if they want to get
And-
more information on the history of this. Because I don't think a lot of people really know like how Hawaii did become a state.
But it didn't. It didn't. That's the point. It didn't. It was. They got control. They never gained the sovereignty. So
Right.
So it's all fake. It's all fake.
Well, I think if we look at, Puerto Rico and Guam and a whole bunch of other places too, we're going to be like, oh yeah, how did they become the United States?
Yeah.
Probably New Mexico, even California. We just take it. It's near us. Trump was saying they wanted to take Canada and they wanted to take, I think, the North Pole.
The thing that was different about but the thing that was different about Hawaii was that it had been established worldwide as an independent country, unlike Philippines and Puerto Rico that hadn't gotten that recognition, and they were technically colonies of Spain. Hawaii was never anybody's colony, so that's the distinction.
Thanks for making that clear.
I do think, though, Hawaii has been better off than some of those other islands like Puerto Rico because they did get statehood. So they've gotten more protections than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, there's definitely some positive for sure.
Right.
But
it's not as positive as staying sovereign as their own kingdom, but considering the circumstances.
Well, the main thing is voting rights and representation, but that doesn't get very far. But at least it's something.
Well, that's what the plebiscite in '59 was about. Is the choice was not, do you want to revert to being an independent country? They never were given that choice. It was either, do you want to continue to be a territory with an appointed governor and no representation in Congress, or do you want to be a state like everybody else? Well, even the progressives at the time, after 3 generations, had lost awareness of this history. And so, really, most people said, it's better to have A rather than B. But I think a lot of Hawaiians just sat it out and said, "This is not pono." Pono is a wonderful Hawaiian word: righteous, honest, correct, honorable, truthful. It's just those 4 P-O-N-O. Wonderful word.
And what's
we
the
don't
deal
have
with
enough
that
of those
flag?
words in English.
Okay,
I want to know what the deal is with that state flag. Why do they got the Union Jack on it still?
Okay, that was okay.
Why haven't they bothered to at least change that?
Yeah, well, I would think so. But the reason for that, I do know the reason. I may not agree, but in it was right around 1843 or 42 that the British tried to claim Hawaii in the same way that the U.S. later did in 1893. And so there was a protest, and that's when the king did the same thing. He protested diplomatically to the Crown of England, and they rebuked the admiral who had tried to claim it. They said, "No, this is inappropriate. We reject that, and we will restore the king to his proper position." So that is why, in gratitude, they put that into the flag, because that restored the independence of Hawaii, as opposed to being grabbed by them. So that was where that came from. And one last important thing. Another thing, the phrase "uamau ka'ea o kapaina." Oh, I'm sorry. "Uamau ka'ea o ka'aina I kapono." The life of the land is preserved in righteousness, is what the king stated when that happened. And that continues to be the motto of Hawaii. The life of the land is preserved in righteousness.
I just put this on screen for people to see.
Okay, well, I have to go. So take care, guys. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I'm going to head out. Thank you, John. You've been fantastic.
We'll wrap this up, I guess. So unless you have any other thoughts.
I think that pretty well wraps it up too, and I sure appreciate this opportunity, and I look forward to further interaction. I won't be around in January, but between now and then, I'll try to get to every one of these shows. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And have a good, actually, John is traveling to Hawaii for the month of January. So he will be in Hawaii in a nice warm environment out of Maine.
I've only had
So
one
let's
opportunity
wish-
to go to Hawaii, and I turned it down.
Ah,
And I kind of regret it. I really regret it because I had a big project at work, and I didn't want to have to, and it was going to be a disaster if I missed it. But that was when a hurricane hit like the area where I was living and took out all the power for like 3 days.
wow.
And that, if I'd gone to Hawaii, I would have missed out. I was missing work anyway because of that power outage. So I could have just been in Hawaii, and I've just kicked myself over and over. It's the only chance I ever had to
It's
go.
spectacularly beautiful.
it's still
Yeah.
there. It's still there. So you can have another opportunity.
Well, now it's different circumstances though, but yeah, there's a chance, I guess. But
Aloha
All right.
tomorrow.
It's tuning out. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jayme, too. Bye.
all right. Well, thanks, Gloria. Thanks, John. Thanks, Jeremy. We're gonna wrap this up, and we'll be back next week with another show. This is Uncontrolled Opposition on the Pasta to Go channel, because our executive producer is Craig Pasta Jardula, and thank you to him for the support he gives us as well. So thanks for watching. Thank you, John.
Don't you have to do the disclosure, the opinions that you hear?
She didn't. Oh, she didn't do that. I'll have to add it into the end of the show. Thanks for catching that, because that's something
I
we
know
got to
you
do.
do front and back.
Well, we got to do that for the radio, so I can
Yeah.
always grab it from a previous episode and throw it in there.
Okay, as long as we don't want you getting in trouble.
Oh yeah, we're fine on YouTube. Like, we can curse on YouTube. I can't do it on the radio though.
Okay.
But just because you can curse doesn't mean you should. That's what I have to tell people. All right. Well, thanks, John. This was a good time, and thanks for everybody watching at home. Make sure that you click the like button and subscribe. Do all the things. You've been watching YouTube for a while. You know the deal. So we'll see you next week with another episode. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and have a good one. Bye bye.
Thank you.